All right, welcome back to Blue Grit Radio, ladies and gentlemen. I have a special guest. This dude and I go back quite a little ways. So, welcome to the show, Matt.
Appreciate it. Happy to be here.
Well, thanks, man. Yeah, we chatted before, and I mean, we've gone through a lot together at our department or your old department, I should say. But one of three, and we'll get into that. Yeah, but when I think about you and I think about the times we had together and some of our core group of friends, um, you know, Goofy is all get up, super compassionate, just a very loyal friend. But there's a reason why your nickname was Jon Snow, and I think that's because your values are unparalleled and that your why, as far as doing the job, at least for my seat, was so much about doing what's right and doing it the right way and standing up for what you believe in and standing up for the little guy. So that's going to be my little teaser. But I just want to have you tell the audience a little bit about yourself and what brought you into a life of service, to include your military career before law enforcement.
Yeah, I will say for the years where people did call me Jon Snow, I didn't really understand the reference because I never watched Game of Thrones
You
until
weren't
about
you
like
weren't nerdy enough.
no, but I actually binged it about a month ago, and I told Lou that is probably the greatest compliment anyone's ever paid me.
It's
So
a pretty legit character. I mean, it doesn't really get much
yeah,
better than like Jon Snow.
yeah, and I never understood it till I obviously have to watch it to understand. But no, that was a very humbling compliment. But yeah, I grew up in suburban Minnesota. Um, Grew up to two great parents, had a couple brothers and a sister. Grew up playing sports. Grew up in the church. Church was always a part of my life, and having a faith. And for whatever reason, I just from an early age, I always liked playing war or GI Joes or paintballing or whatever else. I just enjoyed kind of that kind of stuff. And I vividly remember uh, 9/11. I'm sure many people do our age or even a little bit younger, but I remember seeing 9/11 and didn't really understand what it meant because I was only 11 years old. But and then the subsequent, Iraq conflict and the war in Afghanistan and all that kind of stuff kicked off. And I remember watching the invasion of Baghdad on the news one night, and I'm sure you remember news scenes of the night vision camera and all this, explosions and strafing gunfire and tracers and stuff like that. And
Hmm.
I remember watching it, and it said on the bottom, it was like U.S. Marines invade Baghdad or enter Baghdad or something like that. And I remember being super scared, but weirdly at the same time, I remember thinking that was what I wanted to do. That it just, for whatever reason, it just kind of drew me in, um, and from then on, I just knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to be in the military. I kind of anticipated making a career out of it. Went through high school, played sports, did normal high school activities. I was a um, pretty much a square. Never got in trouble. Never did any drugs.
Jon
Never,
Snow, that's what I'm saying.
never really drank. Never did any of that stuff. And I credit that to a really good group of friends and my older brothers. Learning from them and just my parents and my upbringing. And graduate high school, I knew I wanted to join the Marines. And at the time when I graduated, there was a big push in Afghanistan, and it was all over the news. And they called it the surge. It was like a resurgence into Afghanistan to kind of combat the extremism there and the Taliban and Al Qaeda. And it freaked my mom out. My mom convinced me just like, hey, just go to college, just try it for a year, see how you like it, then if you like it you can go in as an officer afterwards. And
Hmm.
I love my mom and I respect the heck out of her, and so I was like, okay, I'll go to college. I went to a local community college. Didn't want to be there, did really terrible, failed out, wasted all my money.
You
paying
tried.
for
You tried.
class. And but I gave it the old college try, pun intended,
Yeah, literally.
uh, and then I enlisted in the Marines, and I was 19 at the time. Just a kid. I worked at Best Buy part time. Just never really had a lot of responsibility, and the Marine Corps truly made me a lot of who I am today. And I credit a lot of my success and where I've gotten in my life because of the Marine Corps and what it does to young men and women.
Hmm.
Uh, Thoroughly enjoyed my time in the Marine Corps. Did a lot of cool things. Met a lot of great people from all walks of life, all over the country. And I was stationed in Yuma, Arizona, which is the butt crack of America. And my brother was a police officer in the Phoenix area. And so when I wasn't deployed or training, uh, I was, just a dude living down there in the barracks. And so I'd drive up to Phoenix and I'd do ride alongs with him to hang out. And also just had an interest in policing. And my brother was a cop, and I could ride along whenever I wanted pretty much. And I
Quality family
knew,
time.
yeah, and I knew seeing it firsthand, it was something I wanted to do. However long I was in the Marine Corps, I knew eventually when I got out, it was going to be policing was the other job I wanted to do. And again, just the service to others, service to something bigger than yourself, helping others, fighting for a noble, good cause, all parallels to the military. And I actually put in a package to reenlist. I intended on reenlisting in the Marine Corps, and not to bore you or anyone else that's listening, but basically you submit a package, kind of like an application to apply to a
Hmm.
police job. All the things you've
Sure.
done, all your awards or whatever your marks, your reviews in a sense, and basically you go up against all your peers because there's only so many spaces for reenlistment. And I was a high performer. I did well in the Marine Corps. I liked it, so I mean it's easy to do well at something if you enjoy it. And my career planner just left my package on his desk accidentally.
Oh wow.
And so as the weeks and months went by, I'm waiting to hear back from headquarters of Marine Corps. I called
Well,
up
he's a
there, and
Marine,
he's
right?
yeah,
So this makes
and
sense.
exactly,
As I've learned,
and
not from my own experience, but everyone that's in any other branch of the military will tell me.
yeah, and and it's funny not actually thinking about it back then, but when I put in my package for reenlistment, at the same time, my brother had just lateraled to the Seattle area and started
Hmm.
working with you guys. And I, for whatever reason, I made a kind of a option B plan of I put in, I went up and tested in Seattle for the public safety testing and stuff, put an application at where my brother and you guys were working just in case things didn't work out in the Marine Corps. And it turns out, the man upstairs had a different plan for my life, and I didn't end up getting to stay in the Marine Corps, and it was kind of a sour taste in my mouth because I did enjoy it thoroughly, and that was my first option if I had a choice in my career to continue there, and uh, didn't work out. So I got out, and as I was getting out, I was in the process with the agency up there, and thankfully I got a job, and you know started all that, and
Yeah, started doing the thing. Man,
yeah,
I think the older I get, the more so I think things happen for a reason.
oh for sure.
And maybe he wasn't just a forgetful Marine. Uh,
Yeah.
but yeah, man. I mean, it's to think about the butterfly effect or whatever you want to call like how different life would be. Yeah, it's crazy, man. So I'm glad you forgot your packet and you ended up here for a stint. Um, so going back to your transition from the military to police, because a lot of a lot of people that tune in or follow me, it is based on a recruiting kind of theme, and then tips to help them in their career. So first off, I'm curious, what were the traits that stick out most to you when you said that the Marines did a lot for building you into who you are now?
Um, I mean, like I said, I was 19. I didn't have any real responsibility. I had a part-time job. I just failed out of college. I didn't have a lot of direction in my life other than knowing I wanted to be a Marine. And they bring you into this organization, and within the, anyone will tell you who's ever been to recruit training, the first 2 minutes of being there, you're like, oh God, I made a mistake. What what did I do? I shouldn't be here. And
It's not fun at the beginning.
yeah, but I mean, it's kind of crazy. They just essentially strip away everything from your prior life in a sense, and they rebuild you into a determined, disciplined, productive member of an organization. And obviously, some are more productive than others, like any place you go. But they just instill discipline, drive, uh, being a part of something bigger than yourself, having pride in what you're a part of, and
Yeah.
how you represent something bigger than yourself. And we'd go all around the world, and the U.S. Marines are known worldwide. Like we have a reputation of being professional war fighters who get the job done, and we're feared around the globe. And there's um, no secret there. And those are kind of the things that stick out looking back.
Hmm.
Uh, there's obviously, like, technical things and responsibility stuff that I had to do, and so I learned uh, a craft and a job, and so owning that and learning that and trying to be a master of what my job was, I think,
Yeah.
it rolls into everything else in your life, and trying to do that same thing. And I think that, trying to enjoy, and I did enjoy what I did in the Marine Corps, played into me enjoying policing and still enjoying policing, today, almost, 8.5 or however many years, 8 years, 9 years later.
Yeah, that's awesome. So when you think about, or I guess transitioning into law enforcement, you did well in field training, and that can be kind of a mixed bag. And even being a legacy, a younger brother, that can add a layer of pressure. But if you could distill it down to, maybe a couple things, what do you think helped you, or maybe most students, the ones that succeed and fly through FTO?
I think the biggest thing for me and anyone who is successful in FTO is keeping a positive attitude and being able to just shake things off, because you'll make mistakes. I made plenty of mistakes. I felt like I was failing, having no idea what I was doing on a call, and your
Mm-hmm.
FTO is kind of looking at you like, "Hey, what are we doing?" And
Yeah.
secretly in your mind, you're like, "I have no idea." Uh, and but just trying to keep a positive attitude and wanting to be there, taking criticism, being extremely humble is a huge part that I think helps everyone. Being personable, uh, and just keeping your mouth shut. Being a new person, no one really cares what you think. Don't talk unless talked to. People expect you to, you know, to work hard and earn your reputation. And I remember my brother told me, and I can imagine, like, not knowing what that feeling is like, but coming into an agency, I know my brother had vouched for me. He told me, but still not knowing if that would pan out. And he has kind of his reputation on the line. Like, hey, we
Mm-hmm.
should hire my brother. Whatever he said to people to kind of at least get my foot in the door.
Mm-hmm.
And he was worried about that. If I failed, what does that look like
Yeah.
on him? And so I had that in my mind too. Like, hey, I'm not going to fail. I don't
Mm-hmm.
care how long this takes me. I'm going to work at this. I'm going to be successful. In just having the intestinal fortitude to push through the trials and the struggles, and um, and just wanting to be somewhere, even though sometimes it sucked.
Yeah. Well, that's good because you talk about the hiring and getting picked up, and there is a testing process just like everywhere else, and yeah, you had to score high enough, and you had to get through the gauntlet. But then at a certain point, it's like, hey man, what do you think about your brother? And all the powers that be are kind of looking at you to say, hey, is he going to make it? And so there is that pressure, right? Even though you passed everything, um,
Hmm.
and luckily, I can say that we've had people with family or in-laws, cousins, that applied through, and they're like, I don't know. I mean, I'm gonna leave it to you. I think they're a good dude, but I wouldn't say out of an average, beyond an average person, that they for sure would succeed. And so then it kind of goes back into, evaluating the whole person. So, no, I mean, that's a lot of pressure. I'm glad it worked out well for both of you, and
Me
keeps
too.
everything a little bit less awkward in the family.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, I think that positive attitude is so huge. And then I think about your my interaction with you and your handful of years together. But I think that's one of those things, you did always keep a positive attitude. Um, so do you mind talking a little bit about, maybe about some of the highlights in your police career? And that could be calls or spoiler. Matt was on the SWAT team, our very esteemed SWAT team up here. And so I wouldn't be surprised to get back on your team at your new department. But yeah, just tell us a little bit.
So I loved patrol. I think patrol is like the best job. And at the time I got hired, and we've talked about this too, and I've talked to other people about it. I feel super blessed and fortunate to kind of, I was on the back end of kind of the golden years of Kent, where we were super busy, chasing bad guys, canine tracks, chasing cars. It was just, it was action packed. And if you're a cop and you don't enjoy that kind of stuff, then there's something wrong, man. This isn't the career for you. Um, but I mean, there's a handful of calls that stick out, that I'm super proud to be a part of, and uh, I got to do a lot of cool things. The biggest thing I would say is just being able to work with super great people, work for super great people, and I feel that I was able to take so much more than I was able to give back, and I feel super blessed and fortunate with my experience there because our agency out in the Seattle area, you're hard pressed to find kind of a sweeter spot in policing, if that makes sense, as far as the size, the busyness, the specialties, the level of training, the equipment they give you. Like there's so many things that kind of roll into um, this super cool spot we were in there.
Hmm.
And I mean, obviously there's a couple SWAT calls that I'm proud of. There's lives I've saved over the years on different calls, and you know and just the little calls here and there that no one ever knows about. The interactions with people, or a grieving widow who you've just done CPR on for the past 15 minutes, and they called it with the medics, and just trying to comfort someone like that. And
Hmm.
these ones and twos, these interactions where people have probably never really dealt with the police except for that one time with you on that call, and they live their rest of their lives with that image of you and what you did on that one call for 15 minutes is what sticks with people for maybe the rest of their life. And um, I don't know if you're looking like for like specific calls or to dive in or.
Yeah, no, that's good, and I think that that's worth kind of refocusing on because, man, I think in the last few years for people in law enforcement, to come in or to stay in, like you really had to focus on your purpose and your why. And your why has to be so much greater than all the scrutiny and all the media and all these things. And like similarly, I do have some pretty big kind of quote unquote hero moments. I talk about it in my episode with Trevor, one of them, but super proud, right? And not to be like gloating, but like I'm just very grateful that I was able to be a part of that situation and solution. But as well as like truly not to be cheesy, but like you're talking about, there's a lot of those kind of innocuous situations where it's not some major bust arrest and it's not some crazy cool chase. It's just, people being people and just humans connecting in this really, usually sadly, really terrible time. And that you could
Mhm,
be there, and that you could connect and, kind of represent in a certain way and just support people. It is a
for
big
sure.
deal. And so I always encourage the younger people, or just even people that are kind of questioning their resolve, to think about those times, because we do have this really unique opportunity to affect people and bring a little bit more light in some of the most dire situations.
For sure.
Yeah, man. So you talk a little bit about all the awesome things we had going on at the time with the agency, and I think that's really worth kind of revisiting, just because, like I said, a lot of people listen in and they are starting their career, or they're trying to shop around for agencies. Some people send me messages and just trying to get some feedback on what to look for. And
Hmm.
so for you, you've worked for a few different agencies. Um, what advice would you give someone that is testing, and maybe they're throwing out some different applications and going about doing their homework?
I mean, the biggest thing that helped me is just knowing people. Like, obviously, my brother worked as a cop prior to me getting hired. He worked at this agency I got hired at. When he eventually lateraled back to Minnesota, he knew people around, and so just networking and just talking to people that you know, and uh, he said nothing but great things about the this, the agency we were at in the Seattle area. And you do a couple ride-alongs, you meet people who are on the street doing the job. You kind of get a feel for the culture and the demeanor of people. Are people really happy at work? How do
Hmm.
they engage with their coworkers? Uh, those are all things that are just things you can do. And if you really want to get into the nitty gritty of stuff, we're looking for an agency like all their pretty much every agency's policy is online. You can look at their policy and the kind of the way they are directing about going about their job. Um, and if you want to be a more proactive agency, that could policy can be a pretty easy telltale there, just for use of force or pursuits or easy things to look at and understand. Okay, this agency is pretty aggressive, or no, this agency is more conservative
Hmm.
for proactive policing. And um, beyond that, I mean, there's also like benefits, looking at benefits for places, what kind of health insurance that you get. I'm sure we'll get into it, but one of the agency I was at prior to what I'm at now had not very good health benefits. And, having three kids and a wife, and I'm paying, $700 a month for health insurance.
Dang.
And, it, and so things like that, I mean, they can play into your decision making, or at least they should, because
Hmm.
if you plan, whether you're single or you have a family, you plan on being somewhere for a while. Those are all things you got to look at, because they're important aspects of the job and the career. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and then ride-alongs too, like I mentioned, just getting a firsthand feel for what the agency's like, or how they handle calls and things like that,
Hmm.
and the people already hired there, and will you fit in there?
Yeah, no, it fits such a thing. That's your team culture, and you're spending more time with these guys and gals than you are with your own family, right? So it should
Hmm.
feel right. It should feel good. And
Hmm.
then you're sticking your neck out there, and you want to feel like you are a team. You can support each other, and you can be there for each other. So, oh, I love those points. So maybe some people are curious. Okay, like I've mentioned you worked in a couple different agencies, and you just said your last agency. So you don't have to go into details, but maybe for the new listeners, maybe they can consider. Okay, this is a cop that moved around a couple different places for a couple different reasons, and just food for thought for people going through their career.
Yeah, when I initially left the Seattle area, I didn't. I mean, you can always complain about stuff and gripe, but cops are great at that. But truly, I love my job there. I love the people I worked with. I love the area we worked because it was so busy and there's a lot going on. And moving back to the Midwest was purely just a family decision.
Hmm.
And I'm pretty sure I had the best job I'll ever have in the Seattle area. And I got to work with the greatest people ever. And
Times
it's
were
a
a little
very,
different. Laws were a little different for those
yeah,
like
for
glory
sure.
days. Because
For
some people were
sure.
listening and be like, "Seriously?"
Yeah. And, but I realized and I kind of did put it off, talking with my wife and trying to figure out what we want to do, because we eventually wanted to land back in the Midwest where we're both from and have our families close by and raise our kids with our cousins and grandparents and all that kind of stuff. That's was important to us. And I just kept pushing it off, in my own mind, because I didn't want to leave what I had. And that was the career and the job. I've invested a lot of time and effort into this place, and I had to come to the realization that it's just a job, and one of the things that was a big uh, reminder of that is, when Diego died,
Hmm.
it, it's not that this is what it was like, but essentially, it's like, he died, very sad, sucked, miserable experience, but the machine turned on. We
Hmm.
kept, we had a job to do. His spot was filled, and kind of next man up, and I felt it was a very, not intentionally, but it was very cold in my perspective, where we just, it's almost like we kept on going and nothing ever changed. And I realized that, no one cares about me. I'm just a number. The only people that really care about me are my friends, my true friends out there in the agency. While I might be an asset, quote unquote, here or whatever, when I
Hmm.
leave, it's just next man up, next woman up, fill the shoes, fill the job, and get the job done. And it was a hard pill to swallow, to kind of really truly understand that it's just a job, and it's not like your life. Because I feel like it's hard
Yeah,
when you enter the profession. I think every young cop, the job almost becomes your life and becomes who you are, and it's
for
what you
sure.
do, and you live and you breathe and you sleep it. And while there are probably some positives to that, but I think there's a lot of negatives to that too. And so I moved back strictly for family reasons, and it sucked because, like I said, I love the people I got to work with and work for, and what the jobs that I got to do. Um, I landed at a smaller agency, probably half the size as I came from, way less busy, not nearly as violent, kind of a sleepy suburban town. And I think 8 months there or 9 months there, I was very set in my ways about the cop I wanted to be and the way I wanted to do the job.
Hmm.
And I just didn't agree with the way the agency was going and the way they wanted us doing the job. I just had fundamental disagreements with the administration and the way they're taking the agency and leadership decisions they were making. And I just, playing into my decision to leave Seattle, I realized, this is my career. Like, I don't owe this agency anything.
Hmm.
I don't owe my previous agency anything. My career is my career, and I'm gonna do what I'm gonna do what I want in my career, because no one else is gonna do it for me.
Yeah.
And so I left, um, another agency, started FTO again at another one, and now I'm back working with my brother, which is awesome. Uh, Working for an agency that I agree with fundamentally in the way they want
Hmm.
us doing the job. I work for a great chief, who represents us well and backs us, and they still want us to be cops. And we have a mentality where I work: if people commit crime in our city and are victimizing our citizens, like, we're gonna take you to jail, or at least we're gonna give it a good effort within
Hmm.
reason. And that's the way I want to do the job. I got tired of, like, no joke, watching fresh burglary suspects leave the area of a fresh burglary, residential burglary, and
Hmm.
the agency said, it's property crime. We're not going to chase them,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that bothered me. So
For sure. And I know that in the I mean, anyone that's around here in Washington, there's been so many reform laws, and some have kind of been kicked back and forth, and the pendulum swinging. It's not swinging a whole lot. This is not me making a political statement. This is me just saying, there were a lot of cops that left the state because they disagreed with it fundamentally, and they're like, I can't be passionate about this job, and I can't help the people I am sworn to serve in this capacity. And a lot of times, family was an aspect, right? It was easy. Like, they didn't need any more reasons because in-laws or their own family was back in a different state where they came from. They loved to make a life out here, but then they went back, and
yeah,
no judgment. I totally respect that, and I totally respect everyone that's left. The profession. Similarly, I think that there's enough. Luckily, there's enough. I mean, it's scraping by in some departments, but there's enough that say, hey, like I'm here. My life is here, my family's here. If I'm gonna do a job, I'm gonna do it here. Or maybe I
Yeah.
don't do it and I'm still living here. So you do the best you can, and both are right, right? You have to do what's right
Yep.
for you, and that's one thing that I appreciate, definitely in our friend group. But a lot of cops, different departments that I connect with, like they all, I think most people get it, right? And not
Yeah.
to sound too abrasive when you say you don't owe the department anything, and you're right, because I think that some people that don't know you or don't know us that well might say like, well, that's BS, of course he does. It's like, no, it's a deal, right? I will support and do everything I can while I'm here on shift, on duty. I'm going to live my life in an upright way off duty, actually, as well, because I'm representing the department and follow the
Yep.
laws and all that. um, and hey, if stuff hits the fan and there's a community catastrophe, like, yeah, I got to come in and I can't take care of my family, so that sucks too. But while you're in that, while you're in that agreement, yeah, absolutely right. You're going to do everything you can. However, there are other departments, and it's kind of like a business, right?
Hmm.
And maybe that even links back to the statement you said earlier about when Diego died. And I think most of us perceive that the administration and the city, they did a lot, and I think they did a lot really well.
Yeah, they
But
did.
at the end of the day, yeah, it is an organization and it's a
Hmm.
machine, and it's got to keep going. Like there's more crime out there, there's more operations, and I don't
People
know
still need
this.
our service, and yeah.
Yeah, and this has come up a few times lately with people I've been talking to, whether they're in the state, out of the state, but just to talk about departments that care. And I kind of threw this back a couple times, and let me know what you think. But my thing is, like, departments don't care. Like, none of them do, because they're not alive. They're not alive. They're not people. Your department culture is made up of the people in it and the people running it and doing the job on the front lines. But the department itself is not going to care, because it's just a building and it's a stack of policies and some
Yep.
equipment, right? That's the department. So I think that we're misguided sometimes when we turn our attention negatively towards blank. But absolutely right. You talk about your prior agency, like the leadership, and that might be certain members of the leadership, right? And that might be the number one. Um, and then there might be other people just trying to do better and trying to do the best they can. But if you don't take it personally, like, you can make that choice, and you're a positive guy, so you made the choice to go somewhere that more like-minded, that resonates with you, and you can do the job the best way you can do it, especially because you're that kind of cop, right? Otherwise, you think about it, it would be a wasted talent.
Yeah. Yep. And yeah, and then the whole like Diego thing, machine turning on, that wasn't any like one person, or not any like specific instance that made me like soured my opinion. It was just more so the overall observation I had. Like, and even though I know the machine has to keep going, and we still have to provide service to the city, and there's a job to me needs to be done, and even Diego would know that too. Like, our job is dangerous, and sometimes people get hurt and people get killed, and but the job still needs to be done. It just bothered me personally that after those first few weeks, right, where they did do a lot for us, and they were super great to us, but then it was kind of like it was over.
Hmm.
And part of that is me just not really dealing with stuff personally, and probably the best ways. Um, but yeah, I don't know. It's a crummy sandwich any way around, and I didn't envy the chief's job or the city's job during that time, because that's just a crummy time to be in that general area.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I was talking with a group of cops lately, and it was a lot of just frustrations of stress and process, and some of these really critical things that we go through, and there was a bit of, it wasn't even finger pointing, it was just more frustration, saying, "Hey, why can't this happen?" Or, "It would be great if that happened." And this is not me like giving up on others, but this is me saying, "Hey, we can hope for those things, we can ask for those things, we can use channels, whether it's the chain of command or the union, or just personal relationships to try to suggest up or lead up. But ultimately, we can only control what we can control, and that could be as
100%.
much as, hey man, like, yeah, if at a certain point it felt cold, it's like, at least we had each other, right? At least I know that never led up as far as,
For
us,
sure.
kind of supporting each other and talking about Diego, and raising a glass, or maybe a few too many in excess. um, I am glad. I'll say this, just because of the pure support and resilience and wellness piece is, alcohol is a big part of a lot of cultures. It's a big part of first responder culture. There was a point where I was a little worried that every gathering became, about throwing them back for Diego. Um, and I was like, man, at a certain point, like, we got to be able to remember him without getting just blasted, or we got to be able to get
Yeah.
together, in the ways that we would casually, without it being, okay, let's do another round for Diego, because, while cheerful at times, like, it became, in my eyes, a little concerning if it didn't kind of dissipate, but it did. It
Yeah.
ran its course, um, and it's still, yeah, serves a purpose. So I think just my little wellness plug, I guess, is just to be mindful, and just make sure that everyone, you and then your buddies and your family, you're all kind of, it's not, there's never going to be a normal again when you have a loss like that. It's always
Hmm.
going to be different, but you just try to make sure that it's within reason. You can kind of start inching back to,
Yeah.
something that's I guess sustainable and healthy,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm. No,
Yeah.
I mean, I credit all you guys and our core group of friends, for being able to kind of like get through that. I just the trauma bonding is real for stuff like that, and even just the micro incidents on patrol of trauma bonding, of seeing just terrible things together.
Hmm.
Everyone just kind of understands the suck of the job that sometimes you have to endure, and I think that is the most sucky part of this job that anyone could ever endure. And I don't know, I was glad, still I'm very glad and fortunate to be kind of let into the friend group as the new
Yeah.
guy, because I'm the youngest one of
Little
the of that
little
group.
brother. Yeah.
And yeah, and but no, for sure it's a tough thing to deal with.
Yeah. Well, very grateful to have you. Very, very grateful to have all the guys. And it's been really a testament, I think, to real bonding when people leave the state, leave the profession, to include firefighters. I mean, come on, man.
Mhm.
We're still friends, so that's legit. Um, but yeah, man, what do you think helped you the most, through the hard times, Diego, and then the other crap that we have to see?
So I would credit pretty much all of my ability to endure what we've been through and what I've been through, to my upbringing and my faith and my foundations there and growing up in the church. I think that's a very important aspect personally. You any cop would know. I mean, this. Like, we see like the worst things you can think of, and terrible things that human beings do to one another. And I think a lot of it, from my perspective, a lot of cops and a lot of people kind of look at that, and not to get super spiritual or religious, but people are like, how can there be a God? If people are doing this kind of stuff to each other, how could someone
Hmm.
let stuff like this happen? And while I've had those thoughts for sure, it's kind of pushed me the opposite way, where I've been more grounded in what I believe in, and what I know is true. And uh, I've seen some terrible things. I've been through some shitty, or pardon me, crappy
You're fine.
circumstances,
Yeah.
and uh, and quite honestly, I don't know how I get on sometimes. And it's not something I think about it, but I give credit to my foundations in my faith, that's kind of shielded me from maybe some of the things that another who wouldn't have that kind of foundation would deal with. And not saying I haven't dealt with my own problems or, counseling or, post traumatic stress or whatever you want to call it,
Mhm.
anyone who does this job is going to have that. Like there's no way around it. It's just so you, like I said, you go to these calls and you see these things, and there's no way another human being can't take something with you on the way out.
Yeah.
And there are good ways to deal with that kind of stuff, and there are not so good ways to deal with that kind of stuff. Um, and beyond my faith, core group of friends, good people to talk to, and good family who are supportive, good lifestyle habits to, the physiological effects of stress in this job, working shift work. When I was 25, 26, didn't really understand that, but now into my 30s, it starts to kind of catch up a little bit, and you're like, man, this job is a lot more physically hard than I remember it, or being up for a 12-hour overnight shift, sleeping during the
Mhm.
day, not very well, and that kind of stuff, and trying to make good, healthful decisions. What you're eating, exercising, and all that kind of stuff, which I don't do a great job at. But
Operator days.
it's kind of this big, this big puzzle piece of things that people need to do to keep themselves healthy for a long career, however long that is.
Mhm.
And uh, but yeah,
Yeah.
that's kind of what I credit my
I
success and
love that,
my
man.
longevity.
I mean, you hit on all of it, and I think that I was waiting for you to say your family and your beautiful wife and your beautiful children. So yeah, you're not going to be in trouble because you did bring them up. No, but I know that about you. You're a faithful family. You're a family man, loyal friend, right? So those three F's, I'm always talking about those. And then you hit on all the other. It's all pieces of the puzzle, right?
Hmm.
And different people, I think, have different emphasis on those things. And one thing that some places train, and Washington State talks about it, but living outside the blue world, right? So before you become a cop, you're a certain person. You have certain passions and things and support systems. And when you become a cop, the teaching was, hey, make sure you keep those a relevant part of your life. But at this stage of my game, I'm like, man, you got to lean harder. Actually, you got to be intentional and set devotions, or schedule out your buddies. I mean, even if it's like 3 weeks out or a month and a half out, because you're on X shift and it's just not going to work until you
Hmm.
get it on paper, and you really got to hold yourself to that. um, I think we need it more than ever because you have so much that you're contending with, the stresses and all that. And I love that you're comfortable talking about your faith, and that's something that has been a very varying degree of where I guess felt on the spectrum, where there were years, especially in my adolescence, where I felt like learning about war and learning about genocide and abuse and victimization, all these things. I'm like, man, like how can there be a higher power that's good if all this is allowed? But
Hmm.
and there's even been years in police work where I probably would have been identified as agnostic, where I'm like, I don't know, man, I'm just trying to do the best I can. um, but man, for me, I, it's hard to think that there's not a higher power and there's not other things going on, and maybe not
Yeah.
pulling the strings, but nudging things one way or another, to make it all worth it, and to make it all possible, right? When the
Yeah,
news is like doom and gloom, and
for sure.
just
And
want it to work out.
and I think we as police officers, when you're out there doing the job, and I'm sure you can answer this question the same, or you would agree with this statement, but you go to calls or a theft report, or you go to this or that, and it's just people being dumb, or people
Hmm.
you know putting themselves in a bad spot or not fixing their own problems. But then there are calls where you're like, man, this person is evil. This is a bad person. And
Hmm.
there 100% is good and evil, and it happens all the time, and we're the ones that have to deal with it in the aftermath. And even at that just basic level of a higher power, or whatever, I mean, it's 100% out there, man. There are evil people that just do terrible things to others, and have no regard for life and innocence. And well, one of the reasons why this job is, like, one of the last noble professions out there, because we willingly stand in that gap, or try to stand in that gap and defend those people who are innocent, from these people who prey on weak, or prey on people who are um, not paying attention, I guess. And
Yeah.
uh, yeah, man, it's I don't know. Any cop who's been a cop for any amount of time in any relatively busy agency can, I would say, probably agree with that statement
Yeah, and it's easy to get cynical, right, when you're dealing with all
for
these
sure.
people breaking the law and taking advantage of others. But I do like the separation you kind of start down, which is a lot of people make mistakes, and sometimes I think it took me a few years. I started as the kind of self righteous, good kid where I was definitely value judging people, right? I was like, "Oh, you
Hmm.
stole this? Like, why would you do that?" But then, even to interact with people that are, let me think of the correct term, that have substance abuse disorder, right, and are they're addicted to drugs. Um, but at a certain point, and I'd say like more recently in my career than early, just to talk to them and be like, "Hey, man, I've never been addicted I've never been addicted to drugs, but." Um, I know how hard it is to not eat, off of my own decision, right?
Hmm.
To try to build resilience. And I was just bullshitting with this guy. And I was just like, hey man, like I've tried the longest I went was 46 hours and I couldn't do anything but think about food every 10 minutes it would kind of subside and then it would be hunger pains. I was like, that's the only thing I can really connect with, maybe what it's like to be addicted. He like stopped and looked at me and just stared at me for a moment. He's just like, yeah, man, it's kind of like that. I was like, well, shit, like, we were able to connect and just say, like, hey, I'm not trying to blame you or like say you're a terrible person for
Hmm.
being in this situation. And it was more property based, right? Property and drugs. And I think that
Yeah.
there is a huge distinction. What you're talking about, yes, there's absolutely people that there's a that what people would do to each other, and it is hard to see. And you're right. There's people that gotta be in there and help or save others or prevent it. And so yeah, there's definitely that nobility. I think everyone needs to remember. Not to elevate ourselves, but it's a real job that needs to exist because of those bad things.
Yeah.
I had one more question to kind of wrap it, and I think you got to a lot of it, but it was what drives you, and that's in this career, that's as a man of faith, as a family man, like what drives you to be you and do all the things you do.
Yeah, I think you know, f- like I mentioned from the get go, like, just the service has always kind of drawn me. I like the service to others. I find satisfaction in my own, I guess, being, serving others and helping others, and also just wanting to do the right thing. And there's a lot of things that we deal with as cops where people have been wronged, and in all the ways you can describe being wronged, but wanting to make things right. And it bothers me that there are people out there who prey on others. Like,
Hmm.
it bothers me that people live their lives preying on others and victimizing others. And I want to be part of the solution and not part of the problem. So I want to be out there combating that in whatever way that word means. And I still love chasing bad guys. Still love
Hmm.
the adrenaline rush. So there's nothing like chasing a bad guy who just did XYZ crime and now wants to run away, because now we're the people coming to be like, hey, this is not okay. We want to do something about it. And uh, so I still enjoy that rush, but it's just you know, the little onesies and twosies calls that I talked about. This lady. I've dealt with the same lady a couple of times over the past few weeks, and her they're in their late 80s, and the husband is kind of losing his marbles in a sense,
Hmm.
and he, like, been doing weird behavioral stuff and not sleeping, and he fell down one night, and so it was in my district, and I've gone to this house a couple different times for these medical calls and mental health crisis calls. And this poor old lady is essentially by herself in her late 80s, and she's at her wits ends, like, I don't know what to do with him. I don't want him to leave this house and get put in a home. Like, we've been here for 60 years, and she's telling me her story. And uh it isn't like a sexy police call, where you're doing some really cool stuff, but a very meaningful call. And just like sitting down at the kitchen table and just talking with her and letting her talk to me about what's been going on, because she didn't have anyone else.
Hmm.
And we ended up putting him on a hold and having to send him to the hospital to figure out what's going on, because his just behavior was kind of unable to care for himself, and she's getting to the age where she can't really care for him either. And I told her, I was like, "Hey, I'll come back and I'll check on you in the next couple of days, and I'm on work when I get back to work." And so a couple of days later, I just went out on a follow up and knocked on the door, and she like completely forgot that I even said that, and
Hmm.
kind of knocked it off as just being you know something to say when you leave a house. I'll come check on you later or something like that, and chat with her again for another half hour, and just trying to put a human note on the way we do the job. And because we all have our own faults and our own struggles and our own things we go through, and we're no different, just wearing a badge and a gun. And it's calls like that that I, not like tooting my horn, but I personally find a lot of satisfaction being a human and showing empathy and showing my human heart to other people too. And letting them know, like, hey, this does suck, I'm sorry, you know tell me about it. you know Obviously, calls permitting and whatever else is going on in the city, right? There's
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
obviously a balance there, but and just trying to do what's right, because that's what I thought was right. This might not be a police call in a sense, but it's still, I think, the right thing to do, and to check on this lady who doesn't really have anyone around anymore, and her husband's likely on his way out, and dude, that would suck.
Hmm.
And um and trying to never lose that kind of piece of the way I want to do the job, because I think that it's an important piece that matters and that resonates with others in all walks of life, no matter what you think of the police or what you've been through or what you look like or whatever. We're all the same. We're all just broken human beings trying to get through life. And
Just trying to
uh,
hold it together. Yeah.
dude, no joke. Um, and that's the way I want to live my life in general, not just at work. I want to do what's right, and God knows I made plenty of mistakes in my life, and I got plenty to be better at. And but I don't know, if at the end of my day, if I die, I hope people say that I tried to do what was right, and I was a man of faith and lived the way that he believed. So I don't know.
Well, I know that one day, and hopefully it's in like 80 years, but one day when that day comes, as it will come for all of us, and we can't choose, that they will say that, you're a man of high character, uh, wise beyond your years, and extremely loyal, and so humble that you told the story you just told instead of SWAT operation hostage rescue, where you were pulling a victim, a bystander, or I guess an involved party, an unwilling participant, or hostage, whatever you want to classify it as, out of a crawl space attic, and the dude's shooting at the cops and lights the place up on fire. Like, that's an epic story maybe for another day, but I just want to just throw that out there to the people listening. I think that kind of says it all, man. But yeah, man, appreciate you. I appreciate our friendship and our brotherhood. And it's been really good
Likewise.
to reconnect in this kind of unique way. That's, if nothing else, I was like, man, I know a handful of people listen, but even if no one did, like, I'd truly enjoy having this to listen back on
Oh yeah, me too.
some years down the line. So, um, yeah, man. Well, thanks again. And for the listeners, it does help out to spread the message. We covered a lot of ground as far as career advice, navigating trauma, leaning on healthy support systems. Subscribe to the podcast, Blue Grit Radio, share it out, and give us a good rating. But until next time, peace.
Later.